sir, welcome to my channel again. So today I'm gonna continue reading from the page 62, and Candy joined the attack with joy. Glorfula Vaseline, he said disgustedly. Curly glared at him. His eyes slid on past and lightened on Lenny. And Lenny was still smiling with delight at the memory of the ranch. Curly stepped over to Lenny like a terrier. "What the hell are you laughing at?" Lenny looked blankly at him. "Huh?" Then Curly's rage exploded. "Come on, you big bastard. Get up on your feet. No big son of a bitch is gonna laugh at me. I'll show you who's yellow." Lenny looked helplessly at George, and then he got up and tried to retreat. Curly was balanced and poisoned. He slashed at Lenny with his left, and then smashed down his nose with the right. Lenny gave a cry of terror. Blood swelled from his nose. "George," he cried, "make him like me alone, George." He backed until he was against the wall, and Curly followed, slunging him in the face. Lenny's hands remained at his sides. He was too frightened to defend himself. George was on his feet, yelling, "Get him, Lenny! Don't let him do it!" Lenny covered his face with his huge paws and bleated with terror. He cried, "Make him stop, George." Then Curly attacked his stomach and cut off his wind. Slim jumped up. "The dirty little rat," he cried. I'll get him myself." George put out his hand and grabbed Slim. "Wait a minute," he shouted. He cupped his hands around his mouth and yelled, "Get him, Lenny." Lenny took his hands away from his face and looked about for George. And Curly slashed at his eyes. The big face was covered with blood. George yelled again, I said, get him." Curly's fist was swinging when Lenny reached for it. The next time, Curly was flopping like fish on the line, and his closed fist was lost in Lenny's big hand. George ran down the room. Let go of him, Lenny, let go." But Lenny would in terror the flopping little man whom he held. Blood ran down Lenny's face. One of his eyes was cut and closed. George slapped him in the face again and again, and still Lenny held on the closed fist. Curly was white and shrunken by now, and his struggling had become weak. He stood crying, his fist lost in Lenny's paw. George shouted over and over, Let go his hand, Lenny, let go. Slim, come help me," while the guy got any hand left. Suddenly, Lenny let go his hold. He crouched, cowering against the wall. "You told me to, George," he said miserably. Curly sat down on the floor, looking in wonder at his crushed hand. Slim and Carson bent over him. Then Slim straightened up and regarded Lenny with horror. "We got to get him into a doctor," he said. "Looks to me like every bone in his hand is bust." "I didn't wanna," Lenny cried. "I didn't wanna hurt him." Slim said, "Carson, you get the candy wagon hitched up. We'll take him into Solilab and get him fixed up." Carson hurried out. Slim turned to the whimpering Lenny. "It ain't your fault," he said. This punk sure had it coming to him. But Jesus, he ain't hardly got no hand left. Slim carried out, and in a moment returned with the tin cup of water. He held it to Curly's lips. George said, "Slim, we get can now. We need the steak." "Well, Curly's old man can us now." Slim smiled wearily, really, really, Riley, really, Wryly. He knelt down beside Curly. "You got your senses in hand enough to listen?" he asked. Curly nodded. "Well, then listen," Slim went on. "I think you got your hand caught in a machine. You don't tell nobody what happened. We ain't going to. But you just tell and try to get this guy canned, and we'll tell everybody, and then we'll get the laugh." "I won't tell," said Curly. He avoided looking at Lenny. Buggy wheels sounded outside. Slim helped Curly up. Come on now. Carson's gonna take you to a doctor." He helped Curly out the door. The sound of wheels drew away. In a moment, Slim came back into the bunkhouse. He looked at Lenny, still crouched fearfully against the wall. "Let's see your hands," he asked. Lenny stuck out his hands. "Christ Almighty, I hate to have you mad at me," Slim said. George broke in. Lenny was just scared. He explained. He didn't know what to do. "I told nobody out, never to find him." "No, I guess it was Kenny I told." Kenny nodded solemnly. "That's just what we've done," he said. "Right this morning when Curly first lit until your friend, you says. He better not fool with Lenny if he knows what's good for him. That's just what you says to me." George turned to Lenny. "It ain't your fault," he said. "You don't need to be scared no more. You done just what I told you to. Maybe you better go in the washroom and clean up your face. You look like hell." Lenny smiled in his brother's mouth. "I didn't want no trouble," he said. He walked toward the door, but just before he came to it, he turned back. "George, what do you want?" "I can still tend this rabbit, George." "Sure, you ain't done nothing wrong." "I didn't mean to harm, George." "Well, get the hell out and wash your face." Alright, that's it. I finished chapter, I don't remember. I finished the other chapter, and I was like, oh. Alright, I'll continue a little bit from the new chapter, from page 66. Crooks, the Negro stable bug, had this bunk in the harness room, a little shed that leaned off the wall of the barn. On one side of the little room there was a square 4-pan window. On the other, a narrow plank door leading into the barn. Crook's bunk was a long box filled with straw, on which his blankets were flung. On the wall by the window, there were pegs on which hung broken harness in process of being mended, strips of new leather, and under the window itself a little bench for leather working tools, curved knives and needles, and balls of linen thread, and a small hand riveter. Pegs were also pieces of harness, a split collar with a horsehair stuffing sticking out, a broken ham, and a trace chain with its leather covering split. Crooks had his apple box over his bunk, and in it a range of machine bottles, both of himself and for the horses. There were cans of saddle soap and a drippy can of tar with the with his paint brush sticking over the edge, and scattered about the floor were a number of personal possessions. For being alone, Crooks would Crooks could leave his things about, and being a stable bug and a cripple, he was more permanent than the other man, and he had accumulated more possessions than he could carry on his back. Crooks possessed several pairs of shoes, a pair of rubber boots, a big alarm clock, and a single barreled shotgun. And he had books. He had books too. A tattered dictionary and a mailed copy of magazines. Oh, copy of the California Civil Code for 1905. There were battered magazines and few dirty books on a special shelf over his bunk. A pair of large gold-rimmed spectacles from hung from a nail on the wall above his bed. The room was swept and fairly neat, for Crooks was a proud, aloof man. He kept his distance and demanded that other people keep theirs. His body was bent over to the left by his crooked spine, and his eyes lay deep in his head. And because of their depth, seemed to glitter with intensity. His lean face was lined with deep black wrinkles, and he had thin, pain-tightened lips which were lighter than his face. It was Saturday night. Through the open door that led into the barn came the sound of moving horses, of feet stirring, of teeth champing on hay, of a rattle of halter chains. In the stable bug's room, a small electric globe through a meager yellow light. Crook sat on his bunk. His shirt was out of his jeans in the bag. In one hand, he held a bottle of liniment, and with the other, he rubbed his spine. Now and then, he poured a few drops of the liniment into his pink palmed hand, and reached up under his shirt to rub again. He flexed his muscles against his back and shivered. Noiselessly, Lanny appeared in the open doorway and stood there looking in, his big shoulders nearly filling the opening. For a moment, Crooks did not see him, but on raising his eyes, he stiffened and a skull name on his face. His hand came out from under his shirt. Lanny smiled helplessly in an attempt to make friends. Crooks said sharply, "You got no right to come in my room. This here's my room. Nobody got any right in here but me." Lenny gulped and his smile grew more falling. "I ain't doing nothing," he said. "Just come to look at my puppy. And I seen your light," he explained. Alright, that's for today. Now, I finished the chapter, and next time I'll continue reading from page 68, where, well, I got a right to have a light. So I'll see you guys tomorrow. Bye.